keeping the faith in perilous times such as these. Chapter 1, this is lesson 3 in this brief chapter. Thus far, Jude has reminded his readers of the Israelites' failure to enter Canaan. The angels are now reserved in chains, and Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. All this because of sin. These are set forth as an example of those who are suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. The saved can fall from grace. We see that in the Israelites. And also there is such a place as the lake of fire. These are things that are denied today by many. It makes for a kinder and gentler God. And I think that's why most people do deny it, because a lot of people are turned off by a God that would create a place like hell. But whether you're turned off by him or not, either he did or he didn't. And you got to deal with God as he is. I mean, God created hell, and if you don't like it, what are you going to do about it? I mean, there's really nothing you can do about it, and that's the way things are. And according to Scripture, that's the way things are. Hell is a reality. Denying it doesn't make it go away. Saying that a Christian can't fall from grace doesn't make that true. And this is one of the things Jude is pointing out, is that the Israelites did fall from grace. They were all led out of the land of Egypt. They were all accepted by God, born again, so to speak, in the wilderness, but they failed, and God ultimately rejected them. And the fact that they were rejected in the past means that we can be rejected as well today. If, like they did, we become slothful, indifferent, we forget what we're here for and pursue that end. If we make the mistakes that they made, their lot will be our lot as well. It's a warning, and it's a silly thing to ignore a warning, because warnings are there to admonish us not to repeat the mistakes of history. So what a person does with it, well, that's up to them. But as for us, I prefer to see the truth with my eyes wide open, because whether I accept it or not, the truth is the truth is the truth, and that's that. So maybe we can live 70 years believing a lie with some degree of comfort, but in the day of the judgment, the truth will come out. So, and this is Jude's intent, I believe. He's dealing with judgment against false teachers because this was a problem. It's always been a problem. It is a problem. It always will be a problem. Wherever there's truth, there's going to be a lie. There was God in the garden, and there was a serpent in the garden. There was the truth, there was the lie. There always has to be the other. Wherever there's truth, there has to be the lie. The reason we're here is to make a choice. There's got to be something to choose between. Therefore, there has to be something other than the truth. Otherwise, there's no choice. And if there's no choice, then it's not free will. So there has to be the false teacher. There has to be the true teacher. There has to be the false teacher. Both of them are necessary components in life. Even though a lot of folks frown on the suggestion of false teachers because that means you're mean-spirited or whatever, common sense would demonstrate that that must be the case. We're analyzing section 2, verses 8 through 16. We'll continue. He said, likewise, these dreamers, he names 3 things they do. They defile the flesh, they reject authority, and they speak evil of dignitaries. I believe he's talking primarily of dignitaries and authorities in religion. Primarily, of course, this would also be true in any phase of life. Whenever God has established authority, it is to be respected. But Jude's concern right now is with the false teacher. So the false teacher is rejecting the authority God has vested in certain people in his church. These people, they defile the flesh. There's a sexual misconduct is always the chief conduct of misconduct, I should say, of human beings. It's always been a big deal to people. The rejection of authority is ultimately rejecting divine authority, whether you reject the authority of the eldership, the authority of the gospel. Ultimately leads back to a rejection of the authority of God. And to speak evil of dignitaries, I believe is going to be in the context talking about things which people, they don't know what they're talking about, okay? That happens a lot. People will charge someone with being a false teacher, for example, and he hasn't taught anything false. They just don't know enough of truth to discern the difference between truth and a lie, and therefore sometimes they accuse a person who teaches the truth of being a false teacher. They're talking about something they don't understand, and they level evil commentary against certain individuals. That happens quite often, really, unfortunately, because those kinds of sins are very detrimental. That's slander. That's in the realm of slander, of course, which is a high-handed sin, a presumptuous sin. Then he makes connection with Michael, and this is a difficult verse, I think, and we'll take a little time and see if we can understand it. Michael, the archangel, was contending with the devil one day, apparently, and he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses. Well, Michael did not bring against the devil a reviling accusation. Instead, he simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." Okay? I think what Michael did, there was nothing really to discuss about the body of Moses because there's no revelation about the body of Moses. The only thing we know is that the Lord did something with the body of Moses, but what he did, we don't know. And rather than going into a long diatribe of what, supposing what Moses might have done, or God might have done with the body of Moses, Michael simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." He didn't know anything about the matter. He didn't discuss the matter. He just let it go. And he's being commended. He's not speaking evil against the devil because he doesn't know what he's speaking of. He just lets it go. I think that's what we're supposed to get from this because of what's said in the next verse, verse 10. These, on the other hand, unlike Michael, they speak evil of whatever they do not know. They'll talk about stuff they don't know anything about. They'll let on like they know all about it. Well, Michael, he wasn't that way. He didn't know anything about the body of Moses. He didn't talk about the body of Moses. But these false teachers, they'll make evil statements about things they know nothing about. Okay, now Michael didn't do that, and he was an archangel, but these false teachers are presumptuous enough to do that. Now, he's not saying it's wrong for us to contemplate possibilities. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about speaking evil of someone who may not agree with my possibility. In other words, where did Cain get his wife? Well, we could suppose several places, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if I suppose that perhaps Cain married his niece, and you disagree with me, and I say you're a false teacher because you disagree with me, I'm speaking evil about you in regard to something I don't know the truth about. I don't know where Cain got his wife, not with any degree of certainty. But I have an opinion, and you have an opinion, but just because you don't agree with my opinion, that doesn't make you a bad person. And that's what happens a lot of times, especially in religion. If you don't agree with someone else's opinion, I heard all my life. I've heard that once, I've heard it 100 times. Well, so-and-so used to say thus and so, and they knew more Bible than anybody I know. That you hear all kinds of statements that people make, and basically what they're doing is accusing you because you don't agree with what they've said based on their belief from what they heard from someone else, which is basically without knowledge. This is what Michael didn't do. This is what these false teachers would do. They were presumptuous. They were self-willed. They had too much confidence. They felt like they knew the truth even when they didn't know the truth. They couldn't tell the difference between an opinion and what God had actually said. They couldn't tell the difference between custom and law, for example. And this happens to preachers too. It happens to all of us. We all sometimes can't discern between the two. And I think this is what our context is dealing with. These people that Jude is talking about, they'll speak evil of people who don't agree with them, even when they're talking about something they don't really have the truth of the matter on. Because there are opinions in the realm of religion, and just because you don't agree with my opinion, that doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you have a different opinion, so what? But these people, they would speak evil because you disagreed with what they thought happened, and they didn't know. Michael wouldn't do that. He was an angel, and he didn't do that. But these people, they will. They'll speak evil of whatever they do not know, what they do not understand. They'll speak evil about those who simply do not agree with them. And that's unfortunate. A lot of times there's problems in the church over wranglings about matters for which there is no solution, such as where did Cain get his wife? I don't know. Nobody knows, for that matter. But so what? I mean, it doesn't matter in the long run of all things. It really doesn't matter. Michael did not speak evil of that which he did not know. These people, they would. I think that's the meaning of it. And I've got to admit, this is a very obscure verse to me. I hope that's correct. Has anybody got a better opinion? If it's another opinion, it's got to be better, because this is the only thing I can come up with. Okay, let's move on. And whatever they know naturally, physically, materially, carnally, whatever they know by instinct, like a brute beasts, like wild animals, in these things they corrupt themselves. Whatever they're governed by naturally, they let nature run its course, however they decide to do that, because after all, we're only human, and from their vantage point in the world they lived in, it's okay to do that. You could let the five senses do what they wanted to do, because man is a sinner by nature. Man is a sinner, and he can't stop himself from being a sinner. He's going to sin. Therefore, let the body do what it does. It doesn't have any effect on the born-again spirit. That's the thinking of the day. And it's, as far as the Protestant world is concerned, it's probably one of the best accepted doctrines even today. This notion that the body is going to sin, but it doesn't affect the spirit. It's referred to as once saved, always saved. Once a person's been saved, they can never lose their salvation. That's a very popular teaching in the Protestant religious world, and it stems off the same logic as the Gnostics, is that flesh and blood must sin. So these folks, they believe that, and they let the body run its natural course. That's one of the reasons why fornications was such a big part of their lives. Fornications, orgies, and all that. It was all a big part of their religious world, because it didn't matter. It didn't matter what the body did. That doesn't affect the spirit. The body does whatever the bodies do. That's what dogs do. That's what horses do. That's what human bodies do. They're designed to do that, and that's what they do. It doesn't affect the spirit. As long as the spirit has been born again, the body can't commit sin, but that doesn't taint the spirit. Now, you need to keep that in mind, especially as you read the epistles of John the Apostle, because what you're going to discover, like 1 John, for example, it can be very hard to understand 1 John, because John makes statements like, if his seed remains in us, we do not commit sin. Okay? There are statements like that made, and it troubles us because we know we do sin. And as a matter of fact, even John himself said in chapter 1, verses 8 and 10, that if we deny that we sin, we make God a liar by doing so. And then he turns around and he says, for those who are in Christ, that they do not sin, that they cannot sin. And then we start scratching our head because it makes no sense. Well, keep in mind what John is refuting. It's the doctrine that believes that the body can continue sinning, but that will not damn the soul. Okay? It has got nothing to do with the soul. And John will make statements like, he who has been born again does not sin. Okay? Well, he's talking in the present, using present tense verbs throughout the letter, which means does not continue to practice a life of sin. That's the fuller meaning of the statements. In other words, a person will sin, you'll get angry and say something you shouldn't say. You will sin from time to time. But if his word remains in you, you don't live a life of sin. You don't pursue the course of sin. Why? Because his word remains in you, and you can't do that. Because his word won't allow you to do that. It's the difference. It's the difference in the two different schools of thought that existed then, and that exists even today, unfortunately. But this is what Jude is talking about. The things people know naturally, these religious teachers, they pursue those things tenaciously. And this is what you would do, of course. If you wanted to be successful, you appeal to the carnal person. People who like false religion, if they like, people, some people just don't like the things of God. They don't. They're not appealing to them. They don't like to study the Bible. They don't like to pray to God. They don't like to sing hymns to God. Things that we do with God doesn't thrill their soul. They have no pleasure in fellowship with God. Well, why? It's because they're carnal natured. They have pleasure out of things of this world, the things that we experience through the five senses. They've declined the spiritual because they prefer the carnal. Now, if you want to be successful as a false teacher, what you're going to do is appeal to the carnal nature of the person. That's all you got to do, and you're going to be a hit, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for pleasure, enjoyment, entertainment. Some people like dramatics, theater, things of that nature. All these things can be employed in religion, and they can draw the crowds by it, because they appeal to the carnal nature of the person rather than the spiritual nature. And they're successful, quite successful actually, in their endeavor. There was a fellow over at the house the other day. He went to that church, what's it called? We call it Life Church. Life Church. He was over at the house the other day, and he told me they never have under 2,000 on Sunday. That's a pretty good crowd for around here. But they have a format that appeals to the carnal person. Him and I were talking about it, and he did admit to that it did appeal to it made you feel good and things like that, as opposed to what he had ever known as a church before. Anyway, Bill says, moving on. Woe to these people They have gone in the way of Cain. We read about the sin of Cain in Genesis 1. I'm sorry, it should be Genesis 4. 1 through 4. I got Genesis 1. What was the sin of Cain, the way of Cain? What was the root of his downfall? Huh? Okay, he did it the way Cain wants to do it. Okay. Yeah, his was the problem with self-will. He wasn't interested in what the Lord... Abel wanted to do what the Lord wanted. And Cain wanted to do what Cain wanted. So that was his downfall. He was self-willed. And that's what Jude points out. Woe to these people. They have gone in the way of Cain. Like Cain, they too are self-willed. It's going to be their way, not the Lord's way. Then he mentions a second group. They have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit. Well, he done give that one away. The error of Balaam for profit. Balaam, he wanted money. That's what he was after, wasn't it? And a lot of preachers, they're after money. Not just preachers, even church leaders. I read of a song leader that made $125,000 a year as a song leader. And he was a lawyer, but he still made $125,000 as a song leader. A lot of people do what they do for the sake of money. They like money a lot. That was Balaam's problem. Balaam was a prophet of God. And he had been commissioned by the king of Moab, a fellow named Balak. Balak, knowing that Balaam was a prophet of God, Balak wanted Balaam to curse the Israelites so that he could be victorious over the Israelites and defeat them. But Balaam, he wanted to do it because Balak offered to give him a lot of money. So he asked God if he could. And the Lord said, no, you can't curse them. And Balaam at least had enough integrity. He went back to Balak and he said, I can't. The Lord won't do it. And Balak, he raised the ante, give more money. So he go back, and I think he tried about 3 times, maybe 4 times, to persuade the Lord to change his mind. And the Lord wouldn't change his mind. He kept saying, no, you can't curse Israel. And then finally, what Balaam did do, he couldn't curse Israel on the sake of Balak, but what he did do, he told Balak, he said, if you'll send your young Moabite women into the camp of Israel, and if they seduce the men of Israel will worship your idols, and then you won't have to defeat Israel because God will do it himself. So Balak paid Balaam for that information. He wanted money, and he kept going back to the Lord, hoping the Lord would change his mind, allow him to curse Israel, and allow Moab to be triumphant over their cousins. But God wouldn't do it, so finally he sold his knowledge to Balak. He did what he did for the sake of money. And that's what some of these false teachers did also. Like Balaam of old, they do what they do for the sake of money. You sell a good enough story, you draw a big enough crowd, and your collection goes up, and of course your salary goes up. And then he'll mention the third group, those who perished in the rebellion of Korah. Korah here was not content to submit to the authority of God. God had appointed Moses and Aaron to superintend his people. Korah wanted that job for himself. He didn't think it was fair that he would have to submit to Moses. He felt like he was a better man than Moses. He was more spiritual. He was more knowledgeable. He was a better leader. and he didn't think it was right that he should have to follow the instructions of Moses. And therefore, he orchestrated a coup, or an uprising against Moses and Aaron, and he failed in the process. And Jude says that's the way some false teachers are. They want to be the chief. They're not content with being an Indian. They want to be chief, and they'll do what they have to do in order to be chief. So there's three groups. You notice as you go through here, Jude, he's following the way of the Jewish mindset, and he's following threes. Everything's always in a series of threes. But you got the way of Cain, which was self-willed. The error of Balaam was the love of money. The rebellion of Korah, the pride of life. All the three main avenues of sin are involved in the desires of these people. These false teachers, verse 12, are spots in your love feasts. Love feasts, a lot of discussion over exactly what the love feasts are. Some believe that this was like what we would call today a fellowship meal, which it could be. Personally, I don't think so. I think he's talking about the Lord's Supper. He refers to it as a love feast. It's time when the children of God come together to partake of the memorial feast with the Lord. But it could be a different kind of a meal, something we're not really privy to. We don't have much information on. It's really hard to tell. But these are spots in your love feast. Imagine black bugs in a bag of sugar. You know how they stand out? Or in a bag of flour. Boy, you can spot them bugs across the room. The black bug up against that white background. Well, now imagine the church is white, and then you've got these black spots scattered throughout the church. That's what these fellows are. They're spots in your love feasts. When you see that your flour is tainted with bugs, you gently throw away the flour and buy a new bag of flour. We don't like that stuff. Well, that's how the church appears when these spots appear within the church. It turns people off, especially without the church, but also even Christians. They feast with you without fear, and the truth of the matter is they are spots. They take away from the beauty of the bride of Christ. Why? Because they serve only themselves. This is what their thing is. They feign to care about the people, much like Jeroboam did. King Jeroboam, remember? Oh, Israel, it's too much for you to have to go all the way to Jerusalem to worship God. And I love you so very much, I'm going to build 2 altars here in the northern kingdom, and that way you won't have to make that hard trip all the way south down into Judea and then climb that mountain up to Jerusalem because I love you. Well, that wasn't why he did that. Why did he do that? Why did he build them 2 altars up north? Well, he didn't want them going back down there. Jeroboam was afraid that if his citizens traveled back down into Judah, that they would join forces with King Rehoboam again. And if they join forces with King Rehoboam, that means Jeroboam is going to be out of a job. He's not going to be king. Well, what do you do when you got 2 kings in one kingdom? Well, back then, they usually killed one, which would have been Jeroboam. So Jeroboam wasn't trying to make life easier for the Israelites. He was trying to keep his job. He was taking care of himself. He was serving himself. He was a spot in their love feast. He feigned to care for the people of Israel, but the truth of the matter was all he cared about was himself. And you watch closely enough, and that always surfaces. You can always see it. Some more characteristics of these teachers. They're clouds without water. What's a cloud without water? When you see a black cloud in the sky, what do you think is going to happen? going to rain. But what about a cloud that doesn't have any water in it? Looks like it's going to rain, but it don't. It's not. There's no rain. Well, that's what these teachers are. They look like they got the words of life, but they don't have the words of life. There's no water in them. There's no words of life in them. They got plenty of words, but the words aren't going to lead to life. Usually very good talkers. They're clouds without water. They're carried about by the winds. They are late autumn trees without fruit that are twice dead and pulled up by the roots. 3 times he speaks of these trees being dead. Late autumn trees without fruit. They're fruitless. Twice dead. Not once dead, but twice dead. They're fruitless. Pulled up by the roots. They're fruitless, 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 fruitless. They look like they bear fruit, but there's no fruit whatsoever to them. They have the appearance of life, but there is no life. Raging waves of the sea, foaming up their own shame. You've probably been at the side of the ocean or even a lake, but it shows up mostly at the ocean, I think. See them big old waves coming in. You get down there close to the water, and that old nasty-looking water coming up, and all dead fish and cans. Anything that's in the ocean, on the bottom of the ocean, it comes washing up there on the edge, and it's disgusting looking. They're raging waves of the sea. Looks good, but they foam up their own shame. What you get is disgusting. Wandering stars, wandering about out there in space, going nowhere, got nowhere to go, for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. There's nowhere for such a star to go. That's the way these folks are. They're wanderers. There should be an objective. There should be a port that the teacher is leading people to. Well, these teachers have no port to lead people to. They just wander about aimlessly. They have no port to go to. They claim to, but they really don't because they're not God's people. So therefore, it's all for nothing. That's what the Lord was talking about in Matthew 7, verses 21 through 23. When he talked about the masses of people when they stood before him in the day of the judgment, thinking all those years they had walked with him, and his response, I never knew you. I never knew you. I never had a part with you. Well, yeah, they did exactly what they were told to do. Yeah, but the people telling them what to do were clouds without water, late autumn trees that were without fruit, waves of the sea, foamed up to their own shame, and wandering stars. Made a lot of claims, a lot of promises. But in the day of judgment, it wasn't any promise that Jesus made, and he's not accountable for any promise other than his own. And sadly, by the time most people realize that, nothing they can do about it. And there's really nothing worse than that. It's awful. Verse 14, he continues, Now Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men also. Not these particular men, but men of this sort. A long time ago, Enoch, you remember Enoch? He was Methuselah's daddy. Methuselah's daddy. He was the one that the Lord took early. What was he, 350 years old or 65 years old? Something like that. He was a young man. He was only in his 300-something odd years when the Lord took him. But he was a prophet. Even his son Methuselah, his name Methuselah was a prophecy. But he prophesied about the day of the judgment, and that's what the prophecy is. Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment on all, to convict all who are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have committed in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. From the seventh back from Adam, at least, closer to Adam than that, I'm sure, the judgment was prophesied, at least by Enoch, no doubt by others as well, about the ungodly. The eternal abode of those who are ungodly. So the judgment, the reason I say that, some say that the judgment is a New Testament teaching, and that's not true. Enoch prophesied about it a long time ago. These teachers, we're still talking about the teachers, you recall, these false teachers. They are grumblers, they are complainers. They fuss and they bellyache about the things, the ways of God, walking according to their own lusts. You know, God's ways. We were down at Opryland one time. I can't remember what it was called, but youth groups from churches could go there. And we went to this outside auditorium, and there was a preacher from our brotherhood up there speaking to all of our young people. And he was making fun of the Lord's Supper. I'll never forget it. Vince Holloway, he come back there where I was. He said, "Do we have to listen to this stuff?" And I said, "No." So we all got up and we walked out. And while we were walking out, the people sitting there, they was laughing at us and making fun of us, okay? There are people, believe it or not, even preachers, like this fellow was, who grumble and complain about the ways and the things of God. In this case, it was the Lord's Supper, mocking the Lord's Supper, the way we eat the Lord's Supper. We're careful to use unleavened bread, the fruit of the vine. And because of that, there was scorn being heaped on our heads for that by our own brethren. These are the kinds of things these teachers will do because they walk according to their lusts. They do things their way. They march to their own drummer. They think it's silly, and they talk about God's ways as though they were silly. They mouth great swelling words. They have a lot to say. A lot of times they're very good speakers. Sometimes it seems like the false teacher is the better speaker, communicator. I've always had a difficulty communicating. I have a hard time using words. I'm tongue-tied, so I have a hard time enunciating a lot of words. And if I speak too fast, my words run together. But a lot of false teachers, you know, they could they can sell you swampland. I mean, they're really, really good talkers. And that's the way some of these fellows are. They mouth great swelling words, and of course they flatter people. They'll tell you what you want to hear for the purpose of gaining advantage over you. They know how to smooth people, very political minded, a lot of political savvy about them. They know how to smooth people. In 2 Peter chapter 2, Peter talks about this being a widespread problem. He said, as a matter of fact, it was a problem that reached all the way back into the Old Testament. Almost word for word, actually. Peter said what Jude says here, but it's a problem that's always been. There have always been false teachers who were great communicators, and they also have another advantage. They're selling people what they want. So that always helps too. You know, if you're selling a car, and if a person comes into your car lot and they really, really, really want that car, you can probably sell them that car. Because you get them started, they're going to talk themselves into it because they really, really want that car. If a person wants a lie to be the truth, it doesn't really take a lot of effort to sell them what you've got to sell them, because that's what they want anyway. But these people are usually pretty good talkers and are quite successful. Paul talked about this with Timothy in 2 Timothy 4, passage most of us are familiar with. I charge you therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Preach the word, the gospel. Be ready in season, out of season. When it's easy, when it's not so easy. Uh, Convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and teaching. There must be a lot of long suffering. You can't give up too quickly. Long suffering. Suffer long. Don't give up too quickly. And it has to be teaching. Teaching, of course, from the Word of God. Convince people that the truth is the truth. Rebuke people when they are turning away from the truth. Exhort or build up people in the truth, with the truth. Why? Because the time's coming they will not endure sound doctrine. Sound means healthy. The time will come when they will not endure healthy teaching. Why? Because according to their own desires, what they want. And because they have itching ears, they're going to have it. They will heap up for themselves teachers. If you don't give me what I want, I'll find someone that will. I remember one time a preacher down at when James Paul had the funeral home, they wanted the preacher to get their family member to heaven, and this person wasn't a Christian. And I was nearby, I could hear what was going on. And he said, well, I can't do that. And one of them said, well, Brother so-and-so is here, he can. And they went over and got this other preacher and made a last-minute switch. And I stayed because I was curious. And sure enough, that other preacher got that fellow to heaven, which is what they wanted. The time will come when people will not endure sound or healthy teaching, but according to their own desires. They'll find somebody to tell them what they want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth. They don't like it, don't want to hear it. And they will be turned aside to fables, to the lie. They'll turn their ear away from the truth because they will not endure sound teaching. They will be turned aside to fables because they have itching ears and are willing to fetch a teacher and tell them what they want to hear. As time continues, I suppose this will get worse and worse and worse. I don't know that it'll ever get better, but since the time of the cross, it's only continued to get worse with the passing of time. And maybe that won't change. I don't know. Anyway, we'll have to stop right there.